Wow, it really hits you when you start thinking about just how vast and influential Chinese culture is, doesn't it? I mean, we're talking about 5,000 years of continuous history here. And in that time, they've given so much to the world.
It really is remarkable.
Yeah, we see it in art, philosophy, and science. Even their ideas about governing have had a huge impact. It's not like they've just existed for all this time, they've shaped so much.
Absolutely. I mean, they haven't just shaped their own society. They've also had a profound impact on the course of global history.
Yeah.
It's pretty amazing to think about.
Definitely. And that's exactly the journey we're going to take you on in this deep dive. We're going to trace the evolution of Chinese culture from its very beginnings all the way to its powerful global presence today.
Yeah, and it's a fascinating story. We've got some really interesting source materials that delve into how this culture first emerged and how it's changed over time, through dynasties, revolutions, even modernization. And we'll see how it's become such a major force in the world.
Our goal today is to really highlight the key developments and the core aspects of this ancient and dynamic culture. I think what we really want to do is connect those dots in history, create those aha moments for you, and give you a solid understanding of Chinese culture without getting too bogged down in the details.
Right, make it accessible, but also thorough.
Exactly. So to kick things off, let's go back to the very beginning. What are the foundational elements of Chinese culture?
Well, we have to start along the Yellow River, right? It's often called the cradle of Chinese civilization. It's where we see the earliest forms of organized society and government starting to emerge. There's the Xia dynasty, which might go back as far as 2100 BCE, although some of it might be legendary.
Wow, 2100 BCE, that's going way back.
Yeah, it is. But the Shang and Zhou dynasties are really the ones that laid the groundwork for so much of what we recognize as Chinese culture today.
So during those early dynasties, what were some of the key cultural developments that shaped everything that came after?
Well, for starters, during the Shang dynasty, we see the development of the Chinese writing system. We actually have physical evidence of this with the oracle bone script, which gives us a glimpse into their early communication and beliefs.
I've seen pictures of those oracle bones. It's incredible to think about the history behind them.
It really is. Then you have the Zhou dynasty, and they came up with this really important concept called the mandate of heaven. It wasn't just about a ruler having a divine right to rule. It was also about having a responsibility to govern justly and for the good of the people.
That's a really interesting concept. I mean, it's more than just who's in charge. It's about having the legitimacy to rule based on good governance.
Yeah, exactly. And whenever a dynasty was overthrown, it was often seen as a sign that they'd lost the mandate of heaven.
Oh, I see. So that idea was used to justify changes in power throughout Chinese history.
Exactly. And that's not all. This period also saw the emergence of Confucianism and Taoism.
Ah, yes, two of the most famous schools of thought to come out of China.
Exactly. And their impact was huge. They shaped personal morality, education, the way people viewed government, even their entire worldview.
So can you break those down a little for us? What were the core principles of each of those philosophies?
Sure. Confucianism placed a strong emphasis on things like social hierarchy, respecting your elders and authority figures, and being loyal to your family. Education was also really important in Confucianism. It was all about cultivating virtue and becoming a better person.
So it was a very structured and ethical system.
It was. Taoism, on the other hand, focused on living in harmony with nature. It was more about introspection, spirituality, and finding your own path to understanding and fulfillment.
So they offered different approaches to life and society.
They did, and often they worked together in a way. They were complementary frameworks for living a good life and creating a stable and harmonious society.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So we've got these early dynasties setting up the basic structures of Chinese society and these core philosophies influencing values and beliefs. How did things progress as China entered the long period of imperial rule?
Well, to understand how Chinese culture evolved during that time, it's important to understand the concept of the dynastic cycle. Each new dynasty brought its own unique contributions and changes to the existing culture.
Oh, that's right, the dynastic cycle. It's like a repeating pattern in Chinese history.
Exactly. You had periods of growth, prosperity, decline, and then the rise of a new dynasty. Take the Qin dynasty, for example.
Yeah.
They didn't last very long, but they unified China under a single emperor.
That must have been a huge achievement.
Oh, it was massive. They also standardized the writing system, which was really important for communication and cultural unity across such a vast territory.
So they laid the foundation for a unified Chinese culture.
You did. Then came the Han Dynasty. They brought in a long period of stability and expansion. They really expanded China's territory, and they established the Silk Road.
Ah, the Silk Road. It's famous for all the exotic goods that traveled along it, right? Silks, spices, all sorts of treasures.
It was. But it was much more than just a trade route. It was a major conduit for cultural exchange between East and West.
Oh, that's interesting. So it wasn't just about goods, but also about ideas and culture.
Precisely.
Yeah.
China shared its prized goods like silk, porcelain, and later on paper. But it also adopted foreign ideas like Buddhism, which became a major religion in China. You also see new art styles, musical influences, and all sorts of cultural elements coming into China from the West.
So these interactions with other cultures really enriched Chinese culture, prevented it from becoming isolated.
Exactly. And, as we move through the imperial period, we come to the Tang and Song dynasties, which are often considered golden ages of Chinese civilization. These were times of incredible cultural flourishing.
Golden Ages, that sounds exciting. What made them so special?
Well, they saw significant progress in various fields like poetry, painting, and even science. Think of poets like Li Bai and Du Fu. Their poems explored every human emotion imaginable and delved into deep philosophical questions. People still read their work today.
Wow, so their influence continues to this day.
It does. And in terms of technology, this period saw the invention of things like gunpowder, the compass, and block printing.
Those are some pretty major inventions.
They are, and they had a huge impact, not just in China, but all over the world.
Yeah, it's mind-blowing to think about how inventions from China centuries ago still affect us today. But let's shift gears now and talk about a period of huge upheaval in the 20th century, the Cultural Revolution. It sounds like a really pivotal moment in Chinese history. What was going on at that time?
Well, the Cultural Revolution took place from 1966 to 1976. It was a very complex socio-political movement led by Mao Zedong. The official goal was to strengthen communist ideology and eliminate anything seen as capitalist, traditional, or counter-revolutionary.
So it was a very ideologically driven movement.
It was, and it caused a lot of social and cultural turmoil.
How did it impact Chinese culture specifically? What kinds of things were targeted?
It had a devastating effect on many aspects of traditional Chinese culture. Old customs, literature, art forms, religious practices, they were all condemned and suppressed. Temples and historical sites were often destroyed. Intellectuals, scholars, artists, anyone associated with pre-communist culture, they faced persecution and hardship. Even Confucian values, which had been so fundamental to Chinese society for so long, were attacked.
So it was a really destructive period for traditional Chinese culture.
Sadly, it was. Some historians even call it a brutal cultural reset.
It's a stark way to put it.
Mm-hmm.
Did the Cultural Revolution have any lasting effects that are still felt today?
Oh, absolutely. The scars are still there. Right after the Cultural Revolution, there was a lot of caution and sensitivity around cultural expression. But in a way, that suppression actually led to a renewed interest in preserving cultural heritage in the following decades. Like trying to extinguish these traditions actually made people appreciate them more.
It's ironic, isn't it? Trying to erase the past can actually make people want to hold on to it more tightly.
It can. And you see that in the efforts to protect historical sites and promote traditional arts today. Now, if we fast forward to more recent times, China has gone through massive economic and social changes since the reforms of the 1980s.
Right. China's opening up and rapid modernization.
Yes, exactly. And that's had a really interesting effect on the cultural landscape. You have this fascinating mix of old and new, especially in the big cities. You see these super modern skyscrapers, advanced technology everywhere, and a globalized economy.
It's that image of ultramodern China that we often see in the media.
It is, but then, you also see these deep-rooted traditions still alive and well. You'll see families practicing ancient rituals during the Lunar New Year. You'll find people doing calligraphy or Tai Chi in parks. And traditional clothing is still worn with pride on special occasions.
So it's not just a simple replacement of the old with the new. It's a more complex, layered situation.
Yeah, exactly. It's what some people call cultural duality. You might see young people who love Western pop music and fashion, but also practice traditional things like the tea ceremony or study ancient philosophy. Even the education system emphasizes both modern subjects like science and technology and traditional subjects like classical poetry and literature.
So it's about finding a balance between preserving their heritage and embracing the modern world. It shows that a culture can adapt and evolve without losing its roots. What about language? How has the rapid development affected Mandarin Chinese?
Well, Mandarin, or Putonghua as it's officially called, has become even more standardized and widespread, which helps with communication and national unity. It's interesting, though, because alongside that, there's also been a resurgence of interest in ancient Chinese characters and classical literature.
So there's this appreciation for both the modern and the ancient forms of the language.
There is. And of course, with the internet, social media, and a thriving pop culture scene, you've got this whole new vocabulary of slang, colloquialisms, and internet lingo constantly emerging. It really reflects the fast-paced changes happening in Chinese society today.
It's a language that's very much alive and evolving, isn't it? Now, let's zoom out and look at the global picture. How is Chinese culture influencing the rest of the world today?
Well, the impact is really being felt in various ways. One obvious example is Chinese food. It's incredibly popular all over the world.
It's hard to find a city without a Chinese restaurant these days.
It's true. And Chinese cinema is also making waves internationally. Directors like Zhang Yimou and Ang Lee are winning awards and finding audiences all over the world. Then you've got things like acupuncture, tai chi, and feng shui, which have gained huge global followings.
Yeah, those traditional Chinese practices have really gone mainstream, haven't they? It's amazing to see how these different aspects of Chinese culture are being embraced worldwide.
It is. And it's not just happening organically. China is actively promoting its culture on a more strategic level, too.
So they're engaging in what's often called cultural diplomacy.
Exactly. They've set up Confucius Institutes in many countries around the world. These institutes teach the Chinese language and promote Chinese culture, arts, and history. And even big international projects like the Belt and Road Initiative often have cultural exchange programs built into them. It's all part of building relationships and soft power.
It makes sense. But with different cultural backgrounds and ways of thinking, do you think there's a risk of misunderstanding or misinterpreting Chinese culture as it interacts with the West and other parts of the world?
Yeah, absolutely. It can be a challenge. Sometimes Western media, for example, can oversimplify or even misrepresent Chinese traditions and values.
So it's important to be aware of those potential biases and try to get a more nuanced understanding.
It is. That's why things like cultural education and respectful dialogue are so crucial. When we take the time to learn about Chinese history, philosophy, and culture, it helps us to bridge those gaps in understanding and avoid making generalizations or stereotypes.
It's all about developing cultural sensitivity and appreciating different perspectives. Speaking of the future, what are some of the challenges that Chinese culture faces in this era of globalization and rapid technological change? And what do you think the future holds?
Well, one challenge is that rapid urbanization can lead to the erosion of traditional ways of life, especially in rural areas.
Right, as people move to the cities, some of those older traditions might get lost.
Yeah. And there's also the issue of consumerism and material wealth, potentially overshadowing deeper cultural values.
It's that tension between tradition and modernity that many cultures face.
Exactly. But the good news is that there's a strong commitment to preserving and revitalizing cultural heritage, both from the government and from local communities. There's more investment in museums and historical preservation. Digital archives are being created to protect cultural knowledge, and there are educational programs in schools that teach traditional arts and values to younger generations.
That's great to hear. It's encouraging to see that they're not just focused on modernization at the expense of their rich cultural heritage.
I agree. And, we're also seeing some really innovative developments, like using artificial intelligence in traditional art forms, which is creating some exciting new possibilities. And virtual reality is being used to preserve and share ancient historical sites that might otherwise be lost or inaccessible.
Those are some really cool applications of technology for cultural preservation.
They are. And perhaps the most encouraging sign is that young people are showing a growing pride in their cultural roots while also embracing modern life. It's not about choosing one or the other. It's about finding ways to integrate them.
It's about creating a dynamic cultural identity that honors the past and embraces the future.
That's a great way to put it. It speaks to the resilience and adaptability of Chinese culture. It's a culture that's constantly evolving, but also staying connected to its roots.
Well, as we wrap up this deep dive into the evolution of Chinese culture, we've covered a lot of ground. We've explored everything from ancient philosophy and politics to groundbreaking scientific discoveries and artistic achievements. We've talked about the tumultuous period of the Cultural Revolution and the challenges and opportunities of modernization. And we've seen how Chinese culture is making its mark on the world today.
It's been a fascinating journey, And I think for you, it's provided some valuable insights into the forces shaping one of the most influential cultures in the world today.
Yeah.
You're clearly interested in gaining a comprehensive understanding of complex topics, and I think we've achieved that today.
I hope so. And as we leave you with one final thought to ponder, think about this. With all the technological advancements and global interconnectedness we've talked about, what role do you, as an individual, see yourself playing in fostering genuine cross-cultural understanding and respectful engagement with China? It's a question that goes beyond government initiatives and large organizations. It's about individual responsibility and the power of human connection.
It really is something to reflect on.
Well, that's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for having me.
It was a pleasure.